Hello, I'm Chandler Klebs, and I'm here with my mother, Judena Klebs, and she's written down some topics that we're going to talk about. So I guess I'll let her introduce what she's written down, and we can discuss some.
Okay, our last video talked about women and the attitudes in our society toward them, that they appear more to be as objects rather than as real people. And I said I was going to start writing down what some of the hindrances are that are keeping women from feeling good about themselves, and that is causing our society to view women in the wrong way. And so I wanted to cover like 2 or 3 different aspects of it today. And the first one that I want to talk about is the way movies in our society, how they portray women. And we have seen several movies. We didn't realize what we were getting into, that we checked out of the library, but it's the same theme we've seen over and over again, that women are treated pretty much as sex objects in the movies rather than people. And the scenario usually is that men will be talking to one another as human beings, and then a woman walks into the room. But instead of talking to her or listening to what she has to say, they start staring at her body and then talking among one another about what she looks like and who would like to have sex with her and so on. And the woman is not treated like a person. She's not acknowledged as another human being among a group of men. She just suddenly walks in, and she's desirable, but only because of how she looks. If she looks good. And if she looks bad, then she's usually made fun of. And so we've seen that the way movies portray these scenarios over and over again, it's communicating to the public that this is all women really are. And either they want the woman to get naked and show off her body, or they want to despise her for doing so. And they just aren't treating women like people at all in these movies. And I'm going to have Chandler comment on that aspect before I go on to the next one.
Yeah, first of all, I think we have to realize that these movies are made by rich people. Because you have to be pretty rich to fund the making of these movies, where full-time staff is being paid, who knows how many hundreds, and sometimes you can read how many millions of dollars are spent on the making of a movie. And it's actually very depressing when you think that people actually paid to make some of these movies. That's a very depressing thought. But you're right, they absolutely have this idea that it absolutely has to involve naked women, sex, and kissing, and all of that weird stuff like that. And it's really bizarre because there's 2 levels to that. I understand that they do that because it sells movies, because they know there's a lot of sick people out there who will buy that because they want to watch it. But at the same time, that's another depressing thought. The fact that people actually want to see that, and that that's acceptable to them. That it's that acceptable, the way women are treated in these movies.
Well, do you think that women are really thriving off of this?
No, the women aren't thriving at all. It's just making a bunch of men really rich. It might be making a few of the women in the movies rich too, but is it really worth it?
It's giving a message to all women and girls that this is all you are. You're an object, and when you walk in, what you have to say doesn't matter, but men will stare at you because all you are is something for them to stare at and think about what they want to do to you because you're a thing.
Yeah, and another thing that I dislike about it is that that's exactly the way they treat the other animals. That's the way a pig is viewed. Oh, that's bacon. I want to eat that. And it's the exact same view, that whether it's because you see some animal and you want to kill and eat it, or it's some woman that you want to have sex with, the view is kind of the same thing. I mean, there's no thought at all of what that animal wants.
Yeah, it's an object to use. It's not a being, a person with its own thoughts and feelings.
Yes, and that's the important distinction between living and non-living things anyway. I mean, you know, you have to wonder how it's not just bad for women. It's not just bad for the animals to be treated that way, but how in the world does that person who views others that way have any relationships with anybody at all? You know, it's bad for them to have that view that everyone else is just something to either eat or have sex with. and I know it sounds funny, Mom, but there are two things that it seems that just about every animal does, is they have sex and they eat. And so it does seem like those two, the eating and the sexing, are sort of the two primary behaviors. And yet there's got to be a little bit more.
I hope there's more to life.
Yeah, I mean, you're hoping that you're eating to live rather than living to eat. You know, and the same with the sex thing, though I don't want to say that exactly, because I would say something really stupid.
Well, I'm going to go on to the next point. Another thing that we both noticed is one of the things that's hindering women in having good self-esteem is preaching. And I'm talking about preaching both in and out of church meetings. And by various ministers. There's a lot of preaching that makes it sound like everything that goes wrong in this world has to do with women and it's their fault. There's been several things going on lately. And we noticed it's not just the Christian ministers, but there's something about the monotheistic religions of Judaism, Christianity, and the Muslims who all have this attitude toward women. It's very derogatory. And all my life I've heard preachers condemn women for how they dress, and this was before I even understood what in the world they were talking about. But here's the message that I got through the years, and the message that seems to still be coming out with some of the ministers, is that that anything that goes wrong is really women's fault, and if men abuse them in any way, let's say that they decide to be violent and rape them or whatever, it's always the woman's fault because of how she dresses. That if she dresses the wrong way, then men cannot help but rape them. It's never their fault. It's always the woman's fault. And Chandler, you mentioned that some preacher recently said that if women wear yoga pants, they're asking to be raped. Is that what it was?
Yeah, I read that. There was an article that was going around a while where there was some guy, apparently he called himself a pastor or a preacher or something, and he was saying that basically women were asking to be raped if they wore yoga pants. And my first thought to that was, well, explain all the women who were raped before the existence of yoga pants.
Yeah, that's one point.
That's one point.
And you know what? I would automatically think if a woman was wearing yoga pants, that she probably was wearing them because she was going to do yoga. And they're stretchy or whatever.
Yeah.
I've never known a woman who really was asking anyone to rape her.
Yeah.
To me, that's just completely off the wall.
I mean, it's against the very definition of rape, because if some woman goes and politely asks a man to rape him,
then it's not rape.
Well, yeah,
rape is force.
Because if you ask for it, it's not rape.
Exactly. It sounds like an excuse for men to do whatever they want and blame the women for it.
Yeah.
And then we heard something recently, apparently that was by some kind of a Muslim leader, that said that we were all being punished through these strange weather patterns we're going through, such as all the extra rain and everything. because women wear jeans.
Yeah, or I think it was earthquakes that women were being blamed for.
Something
like that.
Okay, it was the earthquakes this time. See, every disaster must be caused by a woman, particularly how she dresses or doesn't dress. And yet, if she wants to be popular, she's expected to take off her clothes.
Yeah.
Which leads me to another matter. Why is it always the woman's fault when she gets pregnant?
That's a very good topic, because I've always wondered how this works. They act as if these women get pregnant all by themselves.
Yeah, what's interesting is I've always heard that women owe sex to men to please them. That it's not for them. They're supposed to give sex to men. It's for the man's pleasure. It's all for him. It's all about him. But then if she gets pregnant, it's her fault.
Yeah.
And she has sinned by getting pregnant. And I think that there's a relationship between having sex and getting pregnant, don't you?
Yes, I think there's a causal connection there.
Yeah, and so it's very interesting that women are constantly condemned for being pregnant, and men get mad and blame the woman if she gets pregnant, and yet if she won't have sex with him, then she's also a criminal.
Yeah, and something else has recently gone on, because now, in these modern times, they have birth control pills and other forms of contraception and weird stuff like that. So then, when a woman gets pregnant, they said, well, you stupid idiot woman, you should have used birth control. What they don't realize is that these women were using birth control and it still failed. And there's all sorts of reasons it does fail. So then they're making these assumptions about that. And once somebody gets into that, the conversation turns sour, because then everybody's got their whole different theories about the morality of birth control.
Yeah, and that leads us right into another matter. As anyone knows that's been watching Chandler or reading his blogs or listening to him at all, he's a very strong pro-life leader, and he speaks out against abortion. But you know something that's really strange, and this is part of what I wanted to bring up today. Ever since he started speaking out against the killing of unborn babies, he's been called a woman hater. And I think I need to clarify something. As a woman who also knows other women that have had abortions and knows something about what goes on, I want you to know that he's just the opposite of a woman hater. Chandler is a woman's advocate. And that's because what people don't seem to understand is that abortion also hurts women, and that women are victims. And it's been covered up a lot, but women also get killed in these abortion places. They're not only killing these innocent unborn babies, but they're hurting the women too, and they can be harmed physically, and they're almost always harmed psychologically, and they grieve for years and years. Even if they were convinced that they were supposed to get an abortion, they didn't really know what they were getting into. They get lied to, and they get hurt. And Chandler was mentioning to me something the other day. I want you to mention about how once they get in there, if they're in pain and they're screaming in pain, how do they get treated?
They get treated terribly by the staff. They're told to shut up, and
yeah, tell people how these people are screaming in pain, and then they're told to shut up.
Yeah, and see, while obviously I'm not speaking from direct personal experience there, I've read a number of stories, because there are plenty of post-abortive women who will tell their experience of how they were treated while they were having an abortion. And that's something that nobody can be prepared for. There's no way that somebody could be prepared for that sort of thing. And you realize that abortion clinics are just like the majority of businesses. They don't care at all about their customers. Even if when something is good, which abortion is not a good thing, the companies want to make the most money. It's not so much about them trying to help people. And that's what confuses me to such an extent, is that people don't realize they're making tons of money. Because it used to be they were demanding that people pay them, like $300 for each abortion or something crazy like that. But now it's gotten to where the federal government's sending them half a million dollars each year or something.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's money in for them. I mean, it's sort of weird because on one hand, if they weren't making any money at it, there might be some people who in some twisted way think that they're helping women. They might believe that. But I don't think that's what's going on. I really think the motive is money.
Well, I'm sure it is. And also, there's another thing that's greatly misunderstood. People say, oh, well, we wouldn't want women to have to go through the pain of childbirth. And so we'll just let them have an abortion. So that's how we show we care about women and want to spare them such a thing. Okay, I've been through a couple times of childbirth, and yes, it's painful. But I would just like to mention that one of my friends, who shall remain anonymous, was forced into an abortion by her husband, and she had already had 3 children at that time. Later on, she had another one too. But she had given birth. She knew what that was like. She told me that the abortion was way more painful than giving birth. And she described to me what it was like. And there's just nothing good about it. And so when people speak out against abortion, they're not woman haters. They are trying to help women, not just protect the unborn babies, but they're trying to help women too. It's not the right thing for women either. It's not good for their health, physically or psychologically or in any way. It causes great problems. And it's a lie to think that you're helping women or that you're a woman's advocate if you are pro-abortion.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to set that straight because my son Chandler is the greatest woman's advocate I know of. And he has written in his books advice to women and how to keep them from getting hurt by men. And so to accuse him of being a woman hater because he's trying to protect the babies, it's not an either or. You're protecting women and babies when you fight against abortion.
Yeah, and when people say these things about me, that I'm a misogynist or sexist or a woman hater, and then I'm anti-woman if I'm anti-abortion, there's a few things they're missing. Is that, well, first of all, half, if not more, of the babies that are being killed are little women.
Well, that's a good point, too. They're girls. And why is society in all different countries throwing away their little girls? Don't you suppose that's giving a message to the ones that survive that they're worthless?
Yeah.
Don't you suppose that could be hurting women's self-esteem all around the world?
Yes.
Not to mention all the other abuses that take place.
Well, yeah, for sure. And especially in India and China, it's even worse. And you know what's so dumb about it is because, like I read in India, they're aborting almost every girl. So there's like no new Indian women being born. So then all these men, they think they've got to have a woman to have sex with. So what do? They get them from other countries. And I'm like, oh man, but the view of that women are just something that we buy from somewhere, something that we own, that view of women is still maintained. And unless that's eliminated, then people don't see the problem. And since the world is run by other men, which are not anything like me, who do hate women, for them, abortion's a good thing. If you hate women, abortion is the ultimate way to hurt them. Like, seriously, because if you hate women and you want them to suffer, the best thing you can do is rape them and get them pregnant and then perform abortions on them constantly. It causes them even greater pain than childbirth is. And you know what's even more bizarre about that is that, and Mom, maybe you can speak to this, but here's a thought that I had. At least the pain that a woman goes through to give birth to a child, she can still view that child as a good thing so that the pain was worth it. But when the pain was from an abortion or even or a miscarriage, even which is something sometimes when they die when people aren't intentionally killing them, then there's not even a baby. There's not anything there to make them feel like at least I have this good thing.
Mm-hmm. Now you're using the word thing. I hope that's not a reflection on the object.
No, okay. Now let me clarify. When I talk about things, I'm talking about that. Yes, I'm a thing. You're a thing. Whatever thing you are that's watching, and my mom's a thing, and babies.
And here I'm trying to talk about how women are not just objects, and then he calls us all things.
Well, the difference. Well, see, here's the deal. We're talking about living things as opposed to non-living things.
Okay, so you don't think objects and things are the same thing?
Well, see, we are objects, but we're conscious objects, and we have our.
Okay, so if we're conscious things,
yeah,
then that's okay.
Yeah.
So I was talking about women being treated like objects as opposed to people.
Yeah.
But you're trying to say that it's okay to be treated as an object as long as people acknowledge that you're a conscious object.
Yeah, well, maybe my terminology is different than other people's terminology, but let me illustrate the difference here. Now, see, this is a horse, but this is not a living horse. This is not a conscious horse. Sure, it looks like a horse, but unlike real horses, which are much, much bigger than this horse,
It looks like a horse?
Yeah.
Okay, I've seen real horses and it doesn't look like one to me.
Well, yeah, I mean, it has 4 legs like a horse.
Okay.
But it was meant to be a horse, but the point is, now, if
it's yellow, too.
Yes.
It's fuzzy. Do you ever see yellow, fuzzy horses in real life?
Well, here's the point, though. The point is, let's just say that for whatever reason, something really bad happens. Now, let's say that there's a fire in our apartment, and this horse gets burned up. I'm not going to go in and run into the house to get the horse if it's not going to feel any pain. It's
right.
not.
And I don't think that thing would feel any pain.
Right. On the other hand, let's say that you have real horses, real living conscious horses in a stable. You can bet that somebody, if there was a fire, they would go and release those horses and let them run away, which of course those horses are going to run away. They're scared of fire just as the humans are. Mm-hmm. So that's when I'm talking about things, I do make a distinction between the living things and the non-living things. But what's particular, the reason why I'm into that terminology of things is because of the gender problem. See, the gender problem is I dislike labeling he and she. I like to use gender neutral. I like it.
So you think saying thing and it makes it gender neutral.
Yes.
But it has nothing to do with thinking of it as an object.
Right. I'm not devaluing their personhood in any way, but it's just that.
I'm glad you clarified
I like to say it when you're referring to a baby you don't know the gender of, especially. You say it. That person, whatever. But it's a gender neutral thing. And the reason that I don't like gender specific terms is because you know what? It makes a difference. Because people are so stupid that if they know a woman wrote a book, well, they won't read that book because a woman wrote it. So what happens is the women start publishing it under a pseudonym of a man's name.
Yeah, that's been known to happen.
The point is, because I know gender specific terms do have an effect on psychology, that's why I tend to dislike using gender-specific terms. I always use her, she, when I'm discussing a woman who is pregnant and why she considers an abortion or not. I do always use she because obviously it's always female in that case. But for other things, I like gender-neutral terms. So when I talk about a thing, it's just that the English language doesn't have a gender-neutral person term, and that's why.
I'm really glad you clarified that, especially for the sake of people who've been hearing us talk about not treating women as objects, and then you start calling them things. I'm glad that got elaborated on a little bit.
Yeah, and see, and it really it's just a semantic difference, because yes, I think of you as an object, as a thing, but you're a living, conscious thing, and I'm the thing that's the son of the other thing. And okay, but people, if they know me,
do you think he has a little bit of difficulty communicating at times?
Well, I don't have a problem communicating with myself. It's other people that's the problem.
Well, people that continually communicate with themselves could have another problem, but I won't go into that.
That's a whole other video right there, Mom. But yes, just to clarify, whenever I talk about living things, I do this with real horses. I do this with dogs and cats and pigs. Do you think that I bend down and look at the genitalia of a sheep or a pig before I talk about it? I'm like, well, because I'm not too interested in the gender of a pig or a dog or a cat or whatever. I'm just not that interested in the gender. It's because we're all equal anyway, and I want there to be an equality, and I want to abolish sexism. And until that's done, I tend to avoid gender-specific terms.
I'm so glad that Chandler was able to clarify that whole thing. I thought that might become an issue, so
yeah.
That's why I asked him to explain himself a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's great about this, Mom, one problem with writing, and even though, I've written some books and I have a blog and stuff, one problem with writing is that somebody can't ask you, like, well, what do you mean by that? You can't have this in-depth conversation. And that's why now I'm recording videos with you, and I'm part of the Free Will, Science, and Religion podcast, and so we're talking about things, and it's a conversation happening, rather than just something like where somebody knows I'm anti-abortion, and they assume that I'm some kind of free will believing Catholic who says women are going to hell because they kill their children. And one important thing to mention about that, Mom, even if I was that type who thought, well, women deserve to go to hell because they kill their children, well, guess what? The men who got them pregnant, they're going to hell too. The abortionists who killed the children, they're going to hell too. The society that made them putting them in that situation and enabled them and told them it was a responsible, good choice, they're all going to hell too. So it's a good thing that I'm not a hell punishing God. Everyone is very glad that I'm not God.
Oh yeah.
But I'm just saying that you can't say the women go to hell, and then all these other people who made them do that they don't go to hell. Because you got to be fair here. If you're sending people to hell, you got to send them all to hell.
Yeah, that goes back to the blaming women for everything issue. So
yeah,
this has been kind of a serious video, but we were able to throw a little humor in there toward the end and maybe give us some comic relief. But it's an important thing, and I hope it's helpful to everyone.
Yeah, and we still have a little bit of time, so I would like to mention that, people have a tradition in Christianity, specifically, of blaming Eve for eating a fruit. And that all the problems, I've heard people say that this is the reason viruses and bacteria and mosquitoes, the reason they exist is because this woman ate this fruit. Of course, the man ate the fruit too. And the serpent tempted them to eat the fruit. Of course,
but everything's women's fault.
Right.
In fact, you know what? You'd think that women would be the devil. Instead, the way they talk about
I know that's the way they make it sound like women are the most evil thing in the world. In spite of the fact that the man ate the fruit, the serpent tempted them into eating the fruit, and God put the fruit there. But for some reason, no, not the man, not the serpent, not God. It's always the woman's fault. That's the way it's been done for so long.
Yeah, and then every woman that's ever been born through all the ages gets blamed because Eve ate that fruit.
Yeah, it's so weird because it's sort of like how the babies, they're to blame if they were conceived in rape. I've never understood that one.
I don't know how they caused that to happen and why they don't have any right to exist now that they're there. Yeah,
and people who believe in the rape exception, that abortion should be illegal except in the case of rape, I have a hard time relating to those people. But that's about...
That's another video.
Yeah, we're out of time for now. So, see you later.